Good afternoon. Welcome to Canning with Kate. I am Kate and I am going to be showing you today how to can quarts of pinto beans. You can also do pints, but my family uses quarts the most frequently because we have a large family and we like beans. So I just wanted to send a shout out real quick to my husband who has been very supportive of the channel, and I have been struggling with the camera and holding it, and he went ahead and bought me a new toy, and that's this tripod. So now I feel a little bit more professional. It's kind of fun, so shout out to him. Thanks, babe. Love you. All right, let's get started. So yesterday with canning pinto beans, not all beans need this, but canning pinto beans, I have found that the best result that I receive is to soak the beans overnight in a big stock pot like this one. Soak them overnight, rinse them out right before you want to use them, and then fill the stock pot back up with water. Bring the beans to simmer for, people say 30 minutes. I typically do between 20 and 30 minutes. I don't like it when my beans are really, really soft, but I do really like the way that the simmering brings the beans at the finished product after they have been processed and everything. So that is my method. So I'm going to show you that method. You can certainly look around for other ways to do it if you want to just can them from dry beans. You'll find many videos doing that too. That's just not my preferred method. I've tried it once and I did not like the results nearly as much as I like these. So let's get started. I have 7 quart jars here, all newly washed and ready to go. I have my utensils, I have my ladle, I have my slotted spoon. Everything is sitting on a nice clean towel. I have my debubbler, my funnel, and I have my lids and my rings. They've all been washed and are ready to go. And just know that throughout my videos, at some time you might hear my children or see one of them passing through the video. I'm a stay-at-home homeschooling mom of 4, so it's gonna happen at some point. So please just know that this is my home and this is what happens throughout my day. All right, let's get started. I have my beans have already been simmering. They are not completely hot anymore. They've been sitting on the stove for a little bit, but they are definitely warm. If you have something warm that you are going to be placing into your jars, make sure that your jars are not cold. It's best to have them warm, but if they're at room temperature, I haven't had a problem with that. So I'm just going to ladle my beans into my jar. Now, for the ladling of the beans, some people will just use the ladle and not really know the ratio of water or liquid to the beans, and that's why I prefer to use my slotted spoon first, and I get my beans up to the point where I want them, which is typically about 3/4 of the way full. So I say it's like at the shoulder of my jars. So right about here. So I leave about that much space for my liquid, okay? Now, when they are being processed, your beans are going to expand and soak up some of that water. So don't be surprised if that space in between your beans and the top of your jar, if that space grows smaller at the end of your processing time. That is normal. You don't want necessarily them to be really packed tight. That's why I never fill my jars with my beans all the way up to where my headspace is going to be. So after we have done all of this, we will start filling the jars with liquid. All right, once I get these all filled, I will come back and show you how to spoon in the liquid. Be right back. All right, we are back. I am done filling my jars with the pinto beans.
Yours done, JT.
And so now I'm going to go ahead and start, actually, I'm going to put salt first. All right, now this is not necessary. It does not mean that this is safer to can if you put salt in your beans. This is personal preference, all right? So I choose to put 1 teaspoon of salt in each of my quart jars. If you want salt in a pint jar, you can put half a teaspoon. So just think half or double, depending on what you choose to do. So in each of these jars, I'm going to put 1 teaspoon of pink Himalayan sea salt. You don't ever want to put white processed table salt in your jars because that is, I can't remember if it's just not safe. I think it has to do with the safety of the food. So you want to make sure that you bring, that you just have a good either pickling salt or put in like Redmond's real salt or pink Himalayan sea salt, something that is completely natural that has not been processed yet. So I have put 1 teaspoon of salt in all of my jars. So that is done. It doesn't matter the order in which you do it. It's just, again, personal preference. I have learned that for me, the salt, if I do not put it over the beans, if I put it on before I load my jars, I apologize, that was one of my children. So if I put salt at the bottom, then the salt never mixes, and then I just have a layer of salt on the bottom of my jars. But if I put them on the food and then pour my liquid on, it actually helps to season. And that's the only reason I use the salt, is for seasoning in these. So here is the liquid. Now you want to make sure that in these quart jars and in the pint jars, you fill your jar to 1 inch headspace. Now 1 inch is typically, it's a general rule of thumb, is right up to that first thread. This one right here, this first thread on the bottom. That is kind of like just an eyeball marker for 1 inch. You can also use your debubbler, which will help you measure the 1 inch line as well for headspace. And the debubbler is great because it has a bunch of the different levels. So you can find your 1/4 inch mark, you can find your 1/2 inch mark, 3/4, and 1 inch marker for headspace.
Mommy,
Yes.
pause it.
Can you just wait for me, please? Again, mom life. All right, so I'm just going to keep filling these. And before I finish filling them, I'm going to show you what I mean by debubbling and how to adjust your headspace. And then I will just go ahead and finish filling these up and then show you how to do the lid and the ring, and we'll load them into the canner. So when you are debubbling, you're just going to take the bottom part of your debubbler and just kind of gently move it around your jar, and that may or may not lower the level of your headspace. So if it does, all you got to do is add in more water. So I'm going to take my debubbler and just measure it and see that I have just a tiny bit more headspace that I can fill up with my water. and then I'm just going to measure again. I see it's full at that 1 inch spot, so I am safe. You don't have to debubble again after you just pour in a little bit more liquid. You can just move forward. All right, let me finish filling these up and I'll be back. All right, I have all my jars filled. They've all been debubbled and I've adjusted the headspace to 1 inch. Now I just wanted to reiterate why it's so important to have that 1 inch headspace. It is because if you have too much or too little headspace, then it can cause either an improper seal or your jars just won't seal at all. And then you will either have to reprocess, which I don't think anybody ever enjoys, or you will have to put it in your fridge and just use it right away, which may not have been your plan. So headspace is important. Please pay attention to that. Now what I am doing here is just wiping my rims. Now even if you can't see any particles or salt or liquid that is on these jars and you think that you didn't drop anything in transfer of the food or the liquid, it's still very important for you to wipe down the rims of your jars just to make sure that there's nothing on there. Because again, if something is on the top of your jar and you put your lid and then you put your ring, it's going to get caught and it's going to cause the seal, the orange part, the seal, to not seal properly, and then again you will either have to go ahead and reprocess or just use that food right away. So make sure that you adjust headspace, make sure that you wipe your rims with hot water, or some people use white vinegar and just use the vinegar around the jars. It doesn't really matter. There's no rhyme or reason necessarily. There is the vinegar is for more oily foods, but I still prefer to use just hot water. So that's what I do. All right, so now I have all of my lids on here. And now we take our rings. These rings can be used over and over and over again until they are either too rusted or they just get gross and you don't want to use them anymore. Then you can throw them away. All right, so I'm going to take my ring and I'm going to just go to fingertip tight, which means I very lightly screw it on, and then just like a quarter, an eighth of a turn more, and you just screw it on a little bit tighter. You don't want to crank that lid because then the lid is going to buckle and the contents of the jar won't be able to release that air, causing a false seal or not to be sealed at all. So I'm just putting all of my rings on here, fingertip tight. There's my assistant back. All right, she is my drama queen. She is made for the stage. I don't know where she got that from. I think she got that from her dad, maybe. Although I'm sure he would tell you differently. Okay, so here's all of my lids. All of my rings have been put on. Everything is ready to go into my canner. So let's go. All right, this is my All-American. I might have to bring you closer. Hold on while I adjust, please. Okay, so I'm all readjusted. This is my All-American canner. It holds 7 quarts in it. So this is my pressure canner. I love it. I've had it for almost 2 years now, and I absolutely adore it. It does not have a seal. It has a metal to metal seal, unlike the Presto. which does have a rubber gasket around it that does need to be replaced at some point. And that's why I chose the All-American. So my water is filled here about 2 inches, and I have my rack in the bottom. Never, ever, ever put your jars directly on the bottom of your canner. You always want to have something to separate the bottom of your jars from the bottom of your canner, because they can crack and cause a big mess, and nobody wants that. So if you don't have a rack, you can even use like a dish towel. You can use the rings from your extra lids. You can just kind of put the rings and secure them somehow together. But there are other ways, but it's nice to have a rack. All right, so I'm just putting all of my jars into my hot water. Everything is hot. You put hot jars, or you put hot food, hot liquid into hot jars into a hot canner, or if everything is room temperature, make sure everything is room temperature and you heat it up slowly, or put cold food into cold jars into a cold canner and heat everything up slowly from there. Okay, so you can see right here, all of my jars are there. One thing I wanted to mention, this is kind of a controversial thing. You're going to find many people who tell you differently, but one of my jars does have a lid that I used before for something else, and I've never had a problem reusing lids. Some people do. It's whatever makes you comfortable. It's your kitchen. You do it the way that you want to do it, as long as everything is safe. All right, so now I'm going to tighten my lid,
I'm wearing a helmet.
and with, that was hot. With the All-American, you want to make sure that your lid is situated evenly all the way around. Otherwise, you're going to get gaps and steam is going to come out, and you might not ever get to pressure. So make sure that your lid is situated. It does take some time to get used to doing.
Air is kind of...
And so just work with it and you'll get used to it. It's not as hard as it sounds. All right.
Mommy, why didn't you finish his eggs?
Okay, so I am just gonna eyeball, and I have to make adjustments. Okay, as you can see, I am just slowly and carefully adjusting the level of my lid. Okay, so it looks like it's all level to me. So now I'm going to start doing the screws. And I just bring the screws opposite ends and I slowly tighten them down. Don't ever use a tool to tighten these down. Just tighten them down as much as you can. Okay, so with this, that's all I need to do. Now my canner does have a dial gauge. Sorry, that was a brain fart there. A dial gauge, and it also has a weighted gauge. And so for me, I really like that as well because I can just focus on the weight. I call it a jiggler because it jiggles and makes a rattling noise when it is building up or when it's at pressure. So let's see. Okay, now I just need to find my weight, but while I'm doing that, I'm working on getting this up to steam. It needs to vent for 10 minutes. Every single pressure canner, every single recipe, no matter what, you need to allow your pressure canner to vent for 10 minutes. So what that means is this little guy, this here is my steam vent. It's also where I'm going to put my pressure the weighted gauge. So here, once it starts to steam really, really well, that's when you start the countdown from 10 minutes. You don't start when you just saw tiny little bits of steam. You want a steady spurt of steam. So once it gets to that point, I will start to time for 10 minutes. Once it's at that 10-minute mark, I'm going to put my weighted gauge on there. And so then it's going to start building up pressure. Slowly build up the heat. Don't crank your heat up all the way really quickly, because then you're going to get a bunch of siphoning. So slowly, I give myself like 5 to 6, 7 minutes, and then I'll crank it up a little bit, and another 6 or 7 minutes until I have reached the temperature that I want, and then I start waiting for it to vent. All right, so this will take some time. Pressure canning does take time, so be prepared, but it is absolutely worth it. Now, before I go, I wanted to show you this. This is super, super important. All right, so this is a ball jar. I got this from the grocery store, and I was going to use this today, so I started washing it, and for whatever reason, I just took a look around my jar, okay, just like this, just kind of eyeballed it. And I noticed something that made me realize this jar is no longer safe to use. If you can see right here, okay, that is a bubble in the glass. Now you want to make sure that your glasses do not have bubbles, because the bubbles, under a pressure canning purpose, the bubbles will expand and they can cause your jars to break in the canner, and that will make a mess. It could cause you to maybe lose other jars. Your food is definitely going to be lost, and that jar is going to be lost. So this one is going to be used for storing dry goods now. I'm not going to use this for pressure canning anymore, and I'm so thankful that I saw that. So every now and then, just go ahead and inspect your jars before you use them. I don't think it's necessary every time, but every now and then definitely inspect them to make sure that there are no cracks, no bubbles in the glass, nothing like that to cause you to lose the product that you're processing and the jar itself. So, all right, I will see you in a little bit after it started venting and we've waited 10 minutes, and I'll show you how to do the jiggler, and then I'll go from there. All right, see you soon. All right, I wanted to bring you back and just show you what the steam is going to look like. Okay, this has been going for almost 10 minutes, just like that. So you can see the steady stream of steam coming out. That's what you want it to look like. So in just 1 minute, I'm going to go ahead and put on my weight. So again, this is going to be 10 pounds. So I'm just going to put this 10-pound weight on and then start my timer for 90 minutes. So for beans, you do a 90-minute process. It's not going to take just 90 minutes because it still has to bring up to pressure. So once it reaches that 10 pounds pressure, that's when I get to start my timer for 90 minutes. And then after the 90 minutes, you turn off your heat source and you let it get back down to 0 pressure. Then you can go ahead and take off your lid. I typically wait like 5 extra minutes before I remove the lid, but that's not necessary. That's just something that you can choose to do or not to do. It doesn't matter. Okay, so there's my timer for the 10 minutes. Let's go ahead and put on my weight. Okay, so there's the 15, there's the 10, and looks a lot scarier than it is. So there you go. And now my weighted gauge is on. The dial gauge should start to come up, and once it gets to the 10, that's when the jiggler will start jiggling, and that's when I will start my timer for 90 minutes. If you're doing pints, then just do it for 75 minutes. So either one, quarts 90 minutes, pints 75. And before I leave you, I wanted to show you the end result. So like I said, I still have 3 more jars left, and this is what they will look like tomorrow. So I filled this jar previously up to 3/4 full with beans, and then I filled in the liquid and the salt. And so you can see that they have expanded a little bit, and my headspace is just a little bit lower, but that's okay. It's sealed, we're all good. So after this does its thing, in 90 minutes, I'll turn off my flame, and I will let my my pressure go down to 0, and then I'll go ahead and remove my jars. Make sure you put your jars, your hot jars, onto like a towel or something, just so that they don't come into contact with a cold surface after having been heated for 90 minutes, or actually longer than that because of the vent time and all that stuff. So just make sure that you don't put your jars, your hot jars, directly onto a countertop surface. Make sure that you put them on a clean towel, and then let them just rest overnight. And then in the morning, you can go ahead and remove the rings, wash up your jars, label them, and put them on your pantry shelf. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you have a wonderful night, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much. Bye.